Welcome to Navigating the Customer Experience. Want to improve your organization's customer service? Looking for insider tips to knock your customer socks off? Then you're in the right place. Here's your host, Yannick Grant.
Welcome to Navigating the Customer Experience. On today's episode, our guest is Robert Wallace. Robert is VP of Growth at Tallwave, which works with companies like PayPal, Banner Health, and Lumen Digital on their products and customer experiences. Robert has 20 plus years of experience in branding, marketing, and communication programs to help drive the company's growth. So, without further delay, sit back, plug your earphones in, and let's jump right into this conversation with Robert. Welcome, Robert.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Could you share with us a little bit about your journey? Even though we did read a very short, description of where you are now and what you're doing, but we'd always like to ask our guests if they could share with us a little bit about their journey in their own words and just how they got to where they are today.
Yeah, sure. Well, at the moment, I'm based in Scottsdale, Arizona, where my company Tallwave is located. But I'm from Pennsylvania, near Pittsburgh, and that is where I spent a lot of my formative years before I went to college and graduate school. And after that, I started my professional career, jumped right into a fast growth company called Airwalk. Airwalk was a head-to-toe action sports manufacturer. They did everything from skateboarding shoes to head-to-toe snowboarding equipment to BMX shoes, et cetera. And that's where I really got my first taste of what magic it is when a customer base and a brand really merge together and make that emotional bond, because Airwalk had that bond at that time, and we had seen some pretty meteoric growth as a consequence of that. And when I was there, I ran retail marketing, so anything that happened at the point of sale, at the retail point of sale. And then I also put my toe in the water. I'm dating myself now, but I opened up the Airwalk's online store, which at the time was not an easy feat and was a very controversial endeavor as well, because this was back in the later 90s when eCommerce wasn't as ubiquitous and there was a lot of worry about cannibalization and those type of things. Mm-hmm. But I ran all of the operations of the online business for Airwalk, and that's really how I sort of backed into the technology world. From there, I moved out to Boston and worked for a couple startups. One was a very large e-commerce site called farmandcountry.com, where I ran that's where I really started my product management side of my background. And that's, so I ran the product there at farmandcountry.com. And then I took that experience to a startup coming out of MIT called Affinova. We were how would I call it? We used evolutionary algorithms. It came out of MIT, and we used evolutionary algorithms to do high throughput consumer testing for brand packaging, logos, product designs, those type of things. So think of it as an incredibly efficient marketing research and feedback tool. I was there early on and helped commercialize the product and the technology itself, taking it and pointing it at different markets. But the one that was particularly worthwhile at that point was the consumer packaged industry. So we sold into Procter & Gamble, Coca-Cola, Johnson & Johnson, ConAgra, you name it, Nestle, the big CPG companies. Mm-hmm. And from there, I moved I moved to Arizona. And that's when I was early on in Tallwave. We're a customer experience design company. And I was brought on early on to stand up the services side of the business, which has now grown to be, I was about 10 years ago. So it has grown to a much larger company. We're now, and we, like, as you mentioned, we work with companies as big as Amex and JP Morgan Chase, all the way to well-funded startups and great up-and-coming companies like Lumen Digital, let's see, Emailage, Algolia, those type of startups that you may have heard of. What I would say is the common thread in my career. I've done footwear, I've done farm equipment, I've done crazy technology out of MIT, and now I'm in a business that works with all sorts of companies. But I would say the one common thread is a great brand doesn't really care about what industry you're in. It's about making that emotional connection between the customer and the company itself. And you do that by having an amazing experience from the beginning. You have a need as a customer all the way through. You've bought the product, used the product, maybe had to get some customer service from that company, all the way through being a repeat customer. So thinking about all the touch points in there is a huge part of what excites me about brand experience and customer experience, which I'll tip my hand to my bias. I think those two things are very close to the same thing, if not the same thing. But understanding the customer experience and what its impact can be is what I would say the common thread is through my marketing, branding, and product management career so far.
All right, sounds good. A very fulsome journey that has taken you to different industries and different touch points. So you have a very diverse approach as it relates to these different industries. So, Robert, you've spanned quite a few industries as you indicated in explaining your journey. Could you share with us? I know you said your current organization is a customer experience design company.
Yes.
And we are going through a global pandemic, How have you been able to navigate in this space as an organization? And have you found it difficult to get the strategy or the design across to your clients or even to your own employees to relate to your clients, especially during this environment that we're all operating in?
Well, I'll start. We've been very fortunate, and our company was, first of all, the nature of our work, which is creative, designers, marketers, consultants, those type of people. It wasn't a huge stretch for us to work remotely. So we were very fortunate in that regard. And we were also very fortunate because we had a broad variety of clients, and some were impacted more fundamentally than others during the pandemic. So that helped us as well. But we definitely have faced the customer experience situation, both from our own standpoint, but also our clients. And if you think about if you think customer experience broadly, we've almost become more acutely aware of the customer's experience and the individual's customer's experience more acutely than we ever have before because of the pandemic. Mm-hmm. So companies have had no choice but to take a long, hard look at how they service and provide value to their customer base. And depending on the industry, of course, you've had to adjust accordingly, but I believe it's hit all industries. So we've seen what has happened in retail, for example, that everything that probably was on the customer experience roadmap, so to speak, curbside pickup, buy online, pickup in store, touchless ordering, all of those things were probably on the roadmap already, but the pandemic pushed it all forward by 5 years or so. So I think that's an easy one and a pretty straightforward one, but anytime you've had to think about how your customers are interacting with you, I think every company and almost every person in that company has had to rethink how we do that effectively and how we provide value and where the value actually lies versus necessarily just in-person interactions. Our work, I think you had mentioned, how do we actually deliver some of our work? Like I said, it lends itself pretty well to a virtual world. We're able to shift a lot of our workshops online, and there are some pretty cool tools that we've been using in order to do that. But I will say that everybody's itching to have a little bit more human interaction.
Amazing, amazing. All right. So tell us a little bit about customer experience design from a retail perspective, or maybe let me not say retail, product-based perspective versus service-based perspective. Could you share with us maybe one or two things that as a company, whether you're a big, organization like let's say a PayPal or an Amazon versus a small company, because we do have quite a range of listeners that listen to this podcast. Some of them hold very big positions in these large organizations, and some of them run their own business, so they wear the hat of product development, marketing, social media, all of the different things. So if we were to look on it from that perspective, what are maybe one or two things that you think they really need to consider to really be above the rest as it relates to customer experience design?
So the one thing that I would recommend, regardless of whether you're a product company or a service company, and regardless of how big or small your company is, I think I would highly recommend that all companies look at and be very diligent and honest about what the actual customer journey is. That is from the point that the customer realizes they have a need, and every step all the way through purchase, use, service, and repurchase, hopefully. So every single touch point. I think, and then making sure that you understand who those user personas are that would be going through that journey. And that's not necessarily, that's actually not demographic per se at all. It's more behavioral when I say persona. So who are the types of people that are using your products or services? Once you have really a good deal of empathy for who those personas are and what they go through in terms of every step of the process around their customer journey, which may or may not have to do with your company specifically, but what is actually their journey as a customer. I think from there, you're in a great position to see where the opportunities are. The opportunities might be, wow, there's a gap in the market in terms of how they are accessing our product and using it. And in that case, you can do a lot of user experience exploration and redesign and see if you can remap how that looks in order to make the product part of that experience more seamless, easier to use, and generally more delightful for the customer. Or if you're a services-based business, you may look at it and say, okay, how are we going to actually support all these interactions with our customers? And thinking about knowing how they interact and how the pains they're feeling, you can start to tailor what services you might provide to them, how you might provide them to them, et cetera. So I know, speaking for Tallwave, but even so, I would say that the customer journey is the core component of, the starting point, I would say, for any kind of company, product or service.
Nice, very nice. All right. Now, Robert, could you share with us what's the one app, tool, or website that you absolutely cannot live without in your business?
There are a few that our company uses, but I'll mention two, and I would say that they're less do or die for me personally, but certainly for customer experience type work and the kind of work that our team does so well. The first one is InVision, which INVISION, I believe, which is a design tool to make high fidelity mock-ups and present them and interact with them with our clients. So we do a ton of work in software and mobile app development, and then we also do some web work as well. And laying those out in InVision and then being able to show something that's high fidelity and in some cases even clickable to our clients and to even perhaps some validation work really helps us understand if we're on the right track and making sure that we're building a product that meets the market need. The other one that I would say has really become pretty invaluable this year is a company called Miro, with Miro, and that company, that their tool allows us to do a whole plethora of interactive activities, from whiteboarding sessions to mind mapping to post-it note work where we put up business model canvases and interact, but it allows everybody to interact in the tool simultaneously as if we were in the room together doing that with physical post-it notes and whiteboards like we used to pre-pandemic. So I'm every time I use Miro, I'm very impressed with how well they've taken into consideration the users of that tool and the people that use whiteboards and workshopping and those type of things so often, like a lot of agency folks, design folks, consulting folks. That's a great example of a company that has really listened to who the personas are, what behavior do they take place in, and then what is the journey that we go through to implement that, and they've built that into the product. So I think they're actually a good example of what I was describing before.
Yes, they are. Could you spell the name of that app for us, just to make sure that we get it correct for the show notes of the episode?
I'm not sure of the URL, but the name of the company is Miro, Miro.
All right, awesome. Okay, Robert, could you share with us what is the one thing that's going on in your life right now? Something that you're really excited about. It could be something that you're working on to develop yourself or your people.
Yeah. Oh, man. Mm-hmm. Well, let's see. What am I really excited about? On a personal level, the more and more of the world keeps getting vaccinated, and I'm halfway home. So, meaning I got one of the two shots. So I'll soon be fully vaccinated, and that is a relief, I'm sure, to everybody that gets it, for themselves and their loved ones. So the things that come with that are more time and more quality time with family and friends. And so that's probably my number one personal item. On a professional level, I think it is when we all go through times like this, and the pandemic was unlike any other, I think when we come out of the other side, we've all transformed a little bit, and I'm excited by what that transformation, as painful as it might have been, that transformation has opened up a lot of opportunities for all of us, especially in the business world.
All right. Sounds good. Okay, so Robert, could you also share with us maybe one or two books that you have read that have had the biggest impact on you? It could be a book that you read a very long time ago, or maybe even one that you read recently, but it really has just stayed with you.
Okay, so one I've read about 5 years ago, maybe. It's called Essentialism. Mm-hmm. And it is, I found it to be very useful and worthwhile for both my personal and professional life. And it's really about identifying what really is adding value to the time that you're spending on something, and when to say no and why, and being very deliberate about that. And in very simple terms, because I think most of us, at least at some point, struggle with saying no and being a little overburdened. But what really is important now is something that essentialism definitely has taught me. So that's a professional. That's sort of both a professional book. And then I'm also reading a book that I'm finding fascinating. It's called Thinking in Bets as in gambling bets, and it's written by a former professional poker player. Mm-hmm. And it's not about it's not at all about poker. It is about decision-making processes and using the mindset that a professional poker player or gambler would be, that they use, and the processes they use in order to evaluate what they're doing. There's a lot of them that are very cool ways to think about the decision making we have to do in our professional lives day to day.
All right. Okay, so we will definitely have the links to those books in the show notes of this episode for all of our listeners that want to tap into that amazing content. Now, Robert, our listeners would have listened to this episode and they're quite intrigued with what you're doing at Tallwave, your journey, and they want to follow you. They want to keep in touch with you. Where can they find you online?
You can find me online. Well, you can find Tallwave online at tallwave.com, TALLWAVE.com. And my link, I can be found on my LinkedIn as well. Let me make sure I get my LinkedIn handle right. Make sure I don't give it some other poor Robert Wallace gets inundated with people. Hold on. Which is linkedin.com /IN /Wallace RA, and that's spelled WALLACERA. And Tallwave can be found on the social channels at Tallwave, on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn as well. So I encourage everybody to check out our social channels as well. We keep a steady stream of great content around customer experience and how it impacts brands from an overall experience standpoint, but definitely strategic business standpoint, and then also from a brand-centric standpoint, et cetera. So we have a lot of great thoughts flowing out on social. So I encourage you all to check it out.
All right, sounds good. Okay, so before we wrap our interviews up, Robert, we always like to ask our guests, do you have a quote or a saying that during times of adversity or challenge, you'll tend to revert to this quote? It kind of helps to get you back on track and get you refocused. Do you have one of those?
I do. It's a little long. Can I read it to you?
Of course.
It's, let me find a good version of it. It is called The Man in the Arena by Teddy Roosevelt, one of our former presidents. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat.
All right, very nice. I think I've heard that quote before, but I've probably heard a shortened version of it because there were pieces of it that did resonate with me when you were reading.
Yes, I apologize to the listeners for me going off there.
No, not at all.
You asked, and I gave you the full version.
Not at all. Great. So we'll have that full transcription of that quote in the show notes of this episode. Definitely a great takeaway.
Great.
Well, all right. Well, thank you so much, Robert, for taking time out of your very busy day, hopping onto this podcast and sharing some great insights and nuggets. And we really appreciate the time.
Oh, absolutely. This has been a blast, and thank you for having me.
Wonderful. So just want to remind our listeners, please feel free to hop on Facebook and join our private Facebook group, Navigating the Customer Experience Community, and hop on to Twitter and follow us at Navigating CX. Until next time, I'm your host, Yannick Grant. We also have a new book available on Amazon, The ABCs of a Fantastic Customer Experience. It's available in ebook and paperback. So if you want to increase revenue in your organization, build a stronger service culture, and create employees or develop employees who are really mastering service delivery in your business, you need to grab a copy of this book. Until next time, I'm your host, Yannick Grant.
Thanks for listening. For more awesome resources to take your customer service game to another level, head over to navigatingthecustomerexperience.com. See you next time.